Jerimarie Liesegang is known as the mother of Connecticut's political transgender movement. She was a fearless social justice leader who advocated tirelessly for legislation supporting LGBTQ communities. Jerimarie was also a passionate community organizer and educator who successfully built coalitions to work for the benefit of all oppressed people in our state.
When Jerimarie began her work in the 1990s, we hadn't yet had the cultural conversations around gender and gender identity that we've had over the last several years. So she was really before her time. She was a real pioneer in this work.
Jerimarie was the most powerful woman I knew. I was overwhelmed by her enthusiasm, her passion for activism, her get out and get there and not be afraid to say what was on her mind attitude.
Jerimarie was born in 1950 on Long Island, New York. Her mother was a nurse, and her father was a longshoreman who strongly supported union workers' rights.
We were basically just working class family, things like that. Then when I went to high school, I struggled. Because when I went to high school, I had no background. And so I was a commercial fisherman. And I did it year round, but I did it after school and things. What happened is I figured, I'll try to go to college. And so I went to a place called Belmont Abbey, North Carolina. And then I got into chemistry, and what I did is I then transferred mid-year my sophomore year to Notre Dame.
Ms. Liesegang went on to complete a doctorate in chemistry at the University of Utah and did postdoctoral work at Harvard. She worked at the National Institutes of Health and PerkinElmer before starting a tech company. After Jerimarie transitioned around 1997, both her marriage and her company dissolved.
I lost my job, I lost everything, I was literally broke, I couldn't get a job, but I was pissed. And I'll tell you, I ended up changing legislation, I ended up changing homeless shelter policies, I ended up transforming into domestic violence shelters, on and on and on. And I can explain how I did that, because it wasn't me, it wasn't because I'm so phenomenal. I'm just a passionate person.
In the 1990s, Jerry had to kind of bring people out of the closet, and she had to convince them that their stories mattered and that their stories actually had legal implications, that we needed to look at policy and changes.
She gives energy and enthusiasm to this movement and gets people involved. Just by her actions and her words, she gave me the courage to transition myself.
In 1999, Jerimarie founded It's Time, Connecticut, which focused on educating communities about transgender rights.
The Connecticut Trans Advocacy Coalition grew out of Jerry's early work with It's Time, Connecticut. There was a need at that point to start looking at policy issues.
In 2002, Jerimarie co-created the Transgender Day of Remembrance in Connecticut to honor the memory of transgender people murdered in acts of violence.
All these women every year and men who are being murdered, either murdered or die by suicide due to harassment and bullying. And that's why continuing the tradition of Transgender Day of Remembrance is extremely important.
Ms. Liesegang co-founded Queers Without Borders in 2003 to broaden the public discourse beyond the movement's most talked about issue, marriage equality.
By founding Queers Without Borders, Jerimarie was going to look at issues of economic justice, social injustice, racism, sexism, misogyny, and homophobia and transphobia. And she drew the connections between all of those oppressions so that the message would resonate for as many people as possible.
In 2004, Jerimarie Liesegang joined forces with the Connecticut Hate Crimes Network to advocate for the inclusion of gender identity or expression, as well as actual or perceived disability in Connecticut's hate crimes laws.
It's always been difficult to add protected categories to the hate crimes law in Connecticut. There was a lot of pushbacks, and yet that kind of very careful, methodical manner in which Jerimarie and the other activists worked eventually did succeed in adding gender identity and gender expression to the law.
Ms. Liesegang was a prolific writer, and she was a sought-after speaker for a wide variety of social justice events. Jerimarie helped the Hartford Gay and Lesbian Health Collective launch the Transgender Lives, the Intersection of Health and Law conference. She also worked with Love Makes a Family of Connecticut to support their efforts in passing legislation in support of marriage equality.
Love Makes a Family, she worked hard to get the Marriage Equality Act passed. But she also realized marriage equality was not the foremost thing. We had to get other rights as well. If you don't have the basic rights to have your own apartment or your own house or your own job, what good is being married?
Jerimarie continued her community organizing strategy to pass an anti-discrimination law for transgender people in Connecticut, which would specifically prohibit discrimination based on gender identity and expression in education, employment, public accommodation, housing, and granting credit.
She got people to testify. She got people to write letters to their congressmen and senators. She got people to make phone calls to the state legislature and to the governor and to the mayor.
This was a carefully fought battle because there was a lot of pushback, and it really was about winning hearts and minds. And as we know, that was what Jerimarie was really good at doing.
An act concerning discrimination was finally signed into law in 2011.
It was her biggest achievement, her proudest moment, and I had never seen Jerimarie as happy as she was the day that was signed into law.
That was as good as when I got the Pride Proclamation passed. I was ecstatic because there were so many times we'd end a session in failure.
Before her death from cancer in 2020, Jerimarie Liesegang arranged to have her personal archive, chronicling the battle for transgender civil rights in Connecticut, donated to the GLBTQ archives at the Elihu Burritt Library at Central Connecticut State University.
Jerimarie's collection was very important for these archives and also for the transgender movement, not only here in Connecticut, but in the entire country.
Today, Jerimarie's legacy as a social justice leader is clear.
I am goddamn proud of who I am. And, and nobody's going to belittle me or use names against me.
She raised the issue of gender identity, gender expression, before anyone else in the state was really talking about it. I think the other part of her legacy is that she always understood that her story didn't exist in a vacuum, and that transgender issues were not really all that fundamentally different from issues around race or class or sexual orientation or immigration status. By making those connections between these different oppressions, I think Jerimarie helped really shape the way this movement is going to move forward in the state.